In today's video, let's talk about search campaigns. The approach that you need to take nowadays is completely different from a year, even 2 years ago. The landscape has completely changed, and likely what you're seeing in your ad account is the CPCs are spiking up. It's getting more competitive to show ads for the right types of searchers, but at the same time, your results are just going down. So in today's video, wanted to break down the strategy that I use for search campaigns, the way that I plan out the structure and the approach we want to take. Arguably, one of the most important things we need to take a look at is the keyword match types. So this really speaks to what I was saying about the change in the way searches are actually matched to your keywords. And really, this means the structure that you need to have with your campaigns, right? So if we look at it, this is an example directly from Google for the keyword furniture store, what exactly we can match to. And if you just pause this video and take a look, really what you can see is exact match functions like phrase match used to, and then phrase match like broad used to. And now really broad match is just different. So we want to get actually to a point where we're using broad match, but in a controlled manner. So really what we want to do is get the correct insight about which keywords and search terms are performing well on exact match. And then as we start to collect some data, we get some insight, then we can move along to broad match where we like to have specific tests of it. So I never like to launch a campaign. Again, depends on the stage you are at with your account, but I would not want to launch with too many keywords. I really want to make sure, do these keywords actually have enough search volume, and are they high intent, meaning they actually have 3 terms attached to them. And with exact match, like I said, what's going to happen is Google is going to go a little bit past your actual keyword that you enter. So there's going to be some slight variations. I just find phrase match, the way it functions, it doesn't have that smart bidding capability matching the way that broad match would, because broad match looks at, as you can see, relate to your keyword. Even though phrase match has the meaning, broad match really understands the intent. And I was actually reading an article on this and speaking to Google representatives as well. The way that broad match functions is it actually looks at the other keywords that you have in your ad group to also understand, okay, what is relevant for it to push out and go find with broad match. So that's something you need to keep in mind. Now let's go back to the ad account. All right, jumping back into the ad account, this is where we can really build out the campaigns. This is just a demo account. The first thing we really want to take a look at is the keywords we want to target. So let's go into Keyword Planner. So we can go to Tools, Planning, and Keyword Planner. And then what we want to do is discover new keywords. And then we want to really change it, obviously, to target market, let's say the US. And I think the most common misconception that a lot of e-commerce brands have is targeting something like men's shoes or women's shoes. And really what happens when you compete on these types of keywords is you're competing with brands that have millions and millions of dollars in budget who are completely going to kill you in the auction. So our idea is even to go after certain styles. Think about the uniqueness you have of your product. We have a different e-commerce brand we're running, but they sell a specific type of clothing with a specific type of material. So really the goal, because those are going to be bottom of funnel searches, you want to think about what is polarizing about your product from it being just a standard, let's say, running shoe for men or for women, but what problem does it actually solve? What material does it have? What solution does it have? Because these are going to target people that are already kind of in the market looking for what you offer, but they're not searching a super generic term like men's shoe or women's shoe. To summarize, the approach that I want you to take is find your competitive advantage. Try to think about the way that people are searching, which is different from just generic terms. Enter them into here, and then you can start to see different examples of keywords to target. All right, so going back to the actual campaign structure, what we want to think about here is have as simple of a structure as possible. Really, we could run with one campaign, and then we use ad groups really to segment by theme. All right, so let's dive right into the strategy here. So let's create a campaign. And then we can create a campaign without goals guidance, search campaign. And then obviously you want your goal to be oriented around whatever you have. If you're directly people kind of purchase off your site, then obviously you want purchases as a goal. But keep in mind, if you're reliant on phone calls, that's a useful conversion as well to have. If people are calling in and then purchasing over the phone or after a phone interaction, speaking with a sales representative, because you'll see with the bidding strategy, what we might want to do is set up a target CPA. So we're really optimizing towards getting as low of a cost per conversion as possible, be it because phone calls are as valuable as purchases. But that's something we can talk about after the build out. So we start with purchases. You can enter your business website here. And then from here, what we want to keep in mind is we're actually not going to use a campaign level bidding strategy. like it says here, we're going to use portfolio bidding strategies, and I'll show you how to set that up, because the benefit of that is the fact that you can set a max CPC. So alongside just setting a target cost per action of what you are willing to pay per conversion, you can also set a max CPC, so you can tell the algorithm, this is what I'm willing to pay per click alongside that. Because oftentimes what you'll see is you'll set up a bidding strategy or campaign and your CPCs will just go crazy, especially if you've taken like Google's automatic recommendations. They say just to switch on max conversions, max conversion value. But when you don't have any target, it can start to bid like crazy. And then all of a sudden you're just draining your budget, not getting enough traffic to really convert. So we'll talk about how you can flip that on. And then we'll click next from here. Of course, exclude all partner sites or display network here. And then obviously we only want to target people that are in or regularly in our location. Let's say Canada. I would recommend segmenting by country at all times. So if you are running a search campaign, shopping campaign, make sure you have specific sets for countries, because what's going to happen is certain countries are going to perform completely different from others. I know that the Canadian market, just personally living here, is completely different from the American one. So we want to make sure the spend that we have, the budgets that we have, are completely different, because the market is smaller and it responds differently to certain types of campaigns or keywords. You might see certain campaigns or keywords are performing better, let's say in the US compared to Canada, and vice versa. So that's why we want to have that data segmented. We would start with a similar approach, but eventually the optimizations may vary for it. Okay, and then language-wise, I just always like to select English, and then we can deselect this. I don't really see the need at the moment to play around with audiences, because most of your targeting is going to be with keywords for search campaigns. But what you can do is, if there are relevant audiences, I would suggest doing kind of an observation where you just use it as a point of insight. Because again, if you just target it, it's really going to limit the number of searches you can show up for. And then with, again, in the cases that you would use targeting, you can do something called an RLSA. It's a remarketing search campaign where you can have your website visitors or cart abandoners who didn't purchase. And then on broad match, you can have different types of keywords that would only serve if this person was searching it, and if the person who is already on your remarketing list is actually searching it. So again, that's a bit of a different, more advanced approach, which we're not going to discuss now, but we'll go on observation. The other thing I would mention as well is actually setting an ad schedule, because sometimes what can happen is in the middle of the night, you can waste a ton of budget, and typically that's not going to be peak hours when people are buying. Again, depends on your brand, but I would set this honestly to like, you can do like 5 a.m. until 12 a.m., for example, just so you're blocking out those like 2, 3, 4 a.m. Time slots. And then a newer feature by Google is AI Max for search campaigns. Really what it does is it's a broad match on steroids, is how I would call it, mixed with a dynamic search campaign. So it combines the elements, like you see here, you have kind of final URL expansion, where you can give it a set of pages that you want to target, and it'll go out and understand which type of traffic is relevant to actually match to those pages. And then you can also exclude certain types of pages. Actually, yeah, you can just exclude those pages, and then those act almost, if you think about it, the reverse of inclusions, right? Because you exclude everything you wouldn't want to send traffic to, and then it is left with whatever other pages that can be indexed. It can also customize your ad copy. I haven't seen the best results with this, to be transparent. So I would recommend kind of keeping that off as well. But again, if you keep it off, then you keep the final URL expansion off. It is a newer campaign, especially if you are kind of really dialing in your search strategy and you just want to target bottom of funnel queries. I would recommend to keep this off. Eventually, when we start to delve into broad match, which I'll make a follow-up video on, we'll want to test out AI Max as well, because it can be good kind of amplifier of what's already working. It's going to take you to the keywords and asset generation section. What you can do as a point of insight is you can add your URL and then do a brief description of your product, and then add an ad group as well. It's good to just give you a baseline of what really to create in terms of the ad, and can give you some guidance so that you're just not starting from scratch. I don't typically use this, but you can if you want to. Let's move on to the ad group section. All right, so moving on to the ad group section, what you'll want to do is make sure you just enter relevant keywords here. I would say pick apart a list of 8 to 10 after you did your research in Keyword Planner. just look at some of those high intent keywords or ones that you know kind of the way people are searching is high intent, right? Not something like men's shoes or women's shoes, like we said. And then here, I would make sure that they're all on exact match. So start off with exact match and have the 8 to 10 in one ad group. I would honestly just focus on one ad group. If there's enough search volume for those keywords, there's no reason that you need to add more ad groups horizontally, right? Like to spend alongside that, because especially what that's going to do is it's going to spread your data more, right? The more kind of spend that needs to be pushed elsewhere, and then it's harder for you to gauge, okay, which campaign or which ad group, sorry, is actually performing well, and then it's harder to scale. Only segment out when there's actually a reason to do so. So if these are different themes of keywords, these are like different product lines, that's where you want to consider creating a different ad group. And then obviously you have certain ads that are sent to a different landing page. So that would really be the thought process there. And then with the ad creation, and this is something super important because the most common misconception that people have is that you actually need to add in these 15 headlines and 4 descriptions, which, yes, it's going to give you that ad strength complete mark, but when you actually highlight over it, this is in terms of the relevance and diversity. So it's basically Google's ability to make as many combinations as possible of your ads so it has enough of a testing pool. Now, the problem is if you combine 15 headlines and 4 descriptions, the amount of combinations that you have is super, super high. To actually test all of those different variations is going to be in the tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. And not to mention, you are likely going to be overlapping and repeating with yourself when you're going through these headlines and descriptions. So the principle I want to leave you with in terms of this is have keyword-based headlines. I would have 1 to 2, which actually match to the keyword. And what I would actually recommend is doing what's called a keyword insertion. So what I did was press the shift and then the left bracket bar, the squiggly bracket one, and then we can do a keyword insertion and obviously title case. But what this is going to do is if the search term matches to a specific keyword, it's going to display that keyword as a headline, right? Because that keyword, whichever triggered it, especially on exact match, is going to be relevant. And then we just make sure that it's on title case so that it's formatted correctly and not kind of all lowercase. But this is going to help with the ad relevance side. And then obviously why we need to actually enter default text is because if there's no keyword or the keyword formatting doesn't fit, so it's more than, let's say, 30 characters, then it has to have a default text to have if it couldn't match that search to a keyword. So that's what I would definitely recommend for that first spot. And then for the second spot, or I would do one keyword insertion and then I would do like one standard type of headline. And you might want to actually experiment and you can pin the keyword into the first spot. And then you can have another ad with promotions kind of highlighted as well. So you can also split test these type of ads. But in terms of, again, the types of headlines we want to run, have a keyword based headline. You want to have a promotional style headline that speaks to kind of the offer you have, get a free gift with orders over X, purchase now and get a gift, get X discount for Y average cart value. That's a super, super important headline to have as well. And then really you want to focus on social proof and, again, unique selling points as well. So if you have thousands and thousands of reviews, you can say we have thousands of happy customers, or loved by families, parents worldwide or nationwide. Whatever is relevant to you, and think about what, again, is unique. What type of reviews do you have? How many reviews do you have? What do people say in those reviews? What is most commonly said that people like about your product? That's all things you want to highlight in the headlines, because your customer data, of course, is going to be the most valuable. Instead of you actually just thinking, you can go through your reviews, go on Google reviews, or if you're on Trustpilot, Judge Me, see what people are most commonly saying, and then you can use that to single out headlines. And the last headline type I would also have is something like a CTA. So just tell them to shop online now, or shop while exclusive discount lasts, something like that, to just make sure they're coming to the site. But as you can see here, there's really just 3 themes of keywords. You don't need more than that, because what's going to happen after is if you have 5 keyword-based headlines, you're just stuffing, right? Because you might have headline 1 as a keyword, headline 2 as a keyword, and headline 3 typically doesn't show, but you might have all of those as keywords, and all of a sudden your ad's kind of ugly, right? Because it's just, you're repeating yourself 3 times. So you want to make sure, again, if you're adding headlines, everything needs to be there for a reason. Don't feel pressured to add 15. I've seen best results with around 5 to 10 headlines, to be honest with you. So I would keep that in mind. And then with descriptions, I would keep these more typically universal, and then I'll have like one product specific one. Why? Is because when you create more ads, more campaigns, everything's just organized, and in the sense you kind of don't have a mess in terms of having so many different descriptions, and you have maybe the wrong descriptions for the wrong types of ads, and then it makes the ads kind of perform worse and CTR is lower. So that's something I would keep in mind. And I would really use your headlines that you create and restructure them into descriptions here, right? So think about, what did I mention in my headlines? For example, the social proof, or let's say you've been in business for a while, or you have had some type of unique partnerships with an athlete, if you're more of like an athletic brand. That's all going to entice somebody to come click on the ad and actually purchase from the site. So these are things you want to keep in mind. And I would honestly do 2 to 3 descriptions. You don't need that fourth as well. Again, the idea here is not to keyword stuff. It's to actually provide value and meaning in the ads, make high quality ads, because that's ultimately what's going to get you the best results, not just having 15 headlines and 4 descriptions. And the other categories here as well, which we want to make sure, I typically will add these to the account level if you have more default types of, let's say, site links. But if you have campaign specific ones, I would actually recommend add more than 4. You can add more than 6 as well, but I think around 4 to 6 is going to be that sweet spot, just because Google can cycle through the different site links that you have. And this is different from headlines and descriptions, right? Because you have these pages on your actual site. So whatever is relevant, that could be something as simple as like about us, because people like to learn more about the brand, right? Like what is your story? You can have seasonal kind of collection pages. You can have certain types of products. That's really how I would approach site links, is you're basically giving more relevant extensions of your ad, where somebody necessarily would say, okay, that's interesting. That's actually what I was looking for, right? Because the whole idea is, if we go to an example of like, if somebody's looking for an oversized men's shirt, it would be good to have like a site link that highlights our new arrival or new collection oversized men's shirts, right? Because that's just going to make the relevance of the ad, and just think of the appeal from the consumer, the fact that they see a site link like that, it's going to be super, super relevant to them. Okay. And then with callouts, I typically want to talk about some things like, we offer free shipping over X amount, if that's kind of like a unique feature that you have, because maybe competitors are offering it over $100 and you offer it over 50, or on all orders, or on sample sales. And then also you can highlight return policy, or even customer service, right? Because if somebody wants to get in touch, is it easy to get in touch with you? How often is your customer service available? You can say 24/7 customer service as well. So features like that, which are a little bit different from headlines, but just reiterating what it about your business actually is unique and you're offering. You want to answer as many questions as possible, right, in the ads, and make it almost a no-brainer for the person to actually click, right? Because if you think about it, if they see a solid discount, they see that your ad is relevant to their keyword or their search, because you have that keyword insertion, for example, showing up as well. And then your description also highlights, a partnership that you had with, for example, with an athlete. And then you have site links about new arrivals about a product. All of a sudden, you have a meaty ad. You have an ad that is actually relevant to the search. And if we X out of here as well, there's other assets that you can add as well alongside site links and callouts. I would recommend going to the asset section and just making sure everything that is relevant is filled out. The next thing that you're going to be taken to is your average daily budget. I would typically not launch with less than a $50 per day budget for a search campaign. I would think of using search campaigns in combination to your shopping or performance max campaigns. So this is a part of the holistic strategy. I wouldn't just rely on these solely. Why? Is because sometimes what you'll see is ROAS is going to be lower for search, and then shopping or feed only performance max is going to be higher. But again, this is really going to act as a mirror of what you're doing in your performance max campaigns as well, in terms of the product target. In my previous video, I talked about using custom labels to actually properly categorize products. And so we want to follow a similar suit in terms of the keywords that we're selecting as well in the ad group structure that we have. Let's say you have different brands that you want to target, or sub brands that you resell. You want to have those as different ad groups, right? Because you want to show a different ad to each of these people. The same thing goes for product types, right? If somebody's searching a certain variant of a product, you want to show them a specific type of ad, and you want to take them to a certain type of landing page. So we want to make sure we have enough budget to actually be aggressive for these types of searches, because remember, they're more bottom of funnel. So where on shopping ads, you might be paying $1 per click. For these, you might have to actually shoulder a $2 to $3 per click, because they're higher intent. So that's really how you have to look at it. And now for a little bit more of the exciting part is with the bidding strategy, the approach that we want to take, because a lot of what we see online isn't really helpful for it. All right, so I X'd out of that campaign because I had pretty much nothing in it. It was just demo style. So what we're gonna go into is one of just like the test search campaigns I made here. Excuse me if you see anything not super relevant to what I'm saying in my videos, because again, this is just a demo account. We're doing some tests. Okay, so this is the competitor search campaign. And where we want it to go, like I was saying, is we want to, what I was saying before is we eventually want to get to the point where we're setting a target cost per action with a max bid. But the thing when you're launching an account is you don't have any conversion data, right? So at the start, we just want to collect some data in terms of getting the right types of searchers to the site, start to get some click data, get 10 to 15 conversions. And then once we have that consistency where we see we're achieving $150 cost per conversion and that's profitable, we can set a target as well. Okay, so what we're going to do here, going back to that more manual approach, is you want to select manual CPC. And as you see, I was clicking around. You select a bidding strategy directly, not recommended by Google, recommended by me. Let's go to manual CPC. And then we want to click save. And here we can go to the actual campaign. And then what you're going to see here is refresh your screen. If you actually selected max bid, you're going to see an option to set a max bid. I would only play around really with the bids at the ad group level, because if it starts to get on the keyword level, it gets a little bit too manual and it's hard to control, especially, just starting off 8 to 10 keywords, okay. But if you start to get to 30, 40, 50 keywords, different ad groups, you want everything to be controlled in a very easy way. And the goal is really to get off of manual bidding, right? Because you would rather leverage the data Google has about your past purchasers, and use that as a signal to go after new customers, right? Rather than you being stuck bidding on traffic without any actual signal to go after converters. Because if you think about it, out of this entire pool of keywords, there's obviously these people that are searching, which are in the market, but only a small percentage of them are still actually in the market to buy, right? And that's what you're trying to get into smart bidding for, is to actually optimize for those people that are showing intent to purchase based on the behaviors they took, let's say, on competitors' sites, their searches, what they're watching on YouTube, for example. So that's what you want to get to. So I would set a max CPC limit at about $1 to $2. And then what you're going to want to monitor is if you go to your columns, and then under competitive metrics here, you can select search impression share, loss to budget, loss to rank. And what we want to look at here is how much of the potential searches in our market are we actually showing up for. So out of those 8 to 10 keywords that we selected, how many do we actually show up for? And that's what search impression share is going to be. And then we're going to see a breakdown of where we're losing our impression share to. Are we losing to rank? So likely that means our quality scores are low, we're not bidding enough. And then lost impression share to budget is going to be we're just not spending enough budget. So you're going to see the breakdown. You might see a super high loss to budget. What you're going to want to tackle is the loss to budget. Okay, because that's the easiest to solve for. And I would really see if you're seeing a super high loss to rank, then I would use that as an indicator. Okay, I want to crank down my bids because I just want to show for more people, and really just maximize the amount of traffic I'm able to get at the start, rather than just being super, super aggressive on a few different queries, right? So again, depends on the budget that you have, but I would set this at around a $1.5 to $2 CPC, $2 really being my recommendation, because typically for standard shopping campaigns, I'll set them at $1, and then you adjust from there. You can still look at the data in Keyword Planner in terms of like an estimate of a low or high page bid, but honestly, your data is going to be the most relevant, because what you'll often find is Google might say on a high bid, you need on the top of page bid, you'll need $7, when really you can get away with $2 to $3, and you see your search impression share solid. And then if you look at top impression share as well, so if we look at top, how many times do you show in those top 4 spots, and then absolute top in that first spot, you might actually see that you're doing okay. You're actually showing up 80% of the time in those top 4 spots, which means you don't really need to increase bids. So that's from an optimization standpoint of knowing how you need to adjust your bidding. That's what I would really think about, is looking at these metrics. And obviously what trumps everything is your return on ad spend, right? Because if you're actually getting conversions for these types of search terms, then I would leave it. let it run, let it collect data. And then only when you get to, 10, 15 conversions in that month, and it's consistent, so you have a consistent kind of cost per conversion, that's where you want to switch over to what's more exciting, which is a portfolio bidding strategy. So what we did here, we went to tools, bid strategies, and then we want to create a portfolio bid strategy. So the one that you want to select really depends on your business. So if you remember what I was talking about at the start of the video, is you want to use max conversions if purchases aren't just your objective, but you equally value phone calls as well. And I would say, aside from that as well, if you're a newer account where you just don't have enough data in terms of bidding on the actual value of conversions, because think about it, if you don't have volume yet, how can you bid on actual value and use that as a signal? That's like the next level. So we'll start with a max conversions bidding strategy, and then you want to set a target CPA. And as soon as we set anything, we can actually set a max bid. And that goes back to what I mentioned, is the difficulty with using campaign bidding strategies where you're using max conversions and then you see your cost per conversion or your cost per click is just super, super high. That's why we want to use this, because this is going to be a threshold of what we're willing to pay at the max per click. It doesn't mean every click is going to be $5 if I set $5 here, but it just means that's the ceiling of what we're willing to pay. And you're likely going to see the average, 50% less. So you'll see it at like $3. And if you see you're hitting your max bid, that's where you need to reevaluate, because if you're getting good results, you might need to increase your bids a little bit more to actually show in front of more people. And that's where that max bid, like the fact that you're hitting that max bid, and then also with impression share, when you're looking at loss to rank, those will be the two telltale signs for that. So that wraps up my strategy for search campaigns. This is really the approach we want to take. We want to make sure we have very targeted ads that actually speak to the customer, because oftentimes now people are just looking for the exact solution to what they search. So we want to make sure we show a really, really relevant ad to them. We want to make sure we start with about 8 to 10 keywords on exact match, with the goal to move towards a target CPA bidding strategy where we're actually optimizing for conversions rather than being stuck on traffic on manual CPC. That's really the early stage, and then we want to progress. Hopefully you found that video useful. If you want me to get this set up for you or walk you through how to set it up, you can book a call with me. My link is down in the description, and then you can also book it with me in my About Us section in YouTube. Alrighty, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.